Picture the devil you have in your head, the Lord of Hell, the cosmic enemy of God, the serpent in the garden, the fallen angel who led a rebellion in heaven and got cast down to rule a kingdom of fire below. Now let me tell you something that's going to sound absurd. Almost none of that is in the Hebrew Bible. The Old Testament, the oldest founding text of the entire Judeo-Christian tradition, doesn't have this character. No fallen angel ruling hell. No horned rebel. And in the story of Adam and Eve, the serpent is just a serpent. Now, I know how that sounds, and let me be straight with you right away, because this channel isn't about tearing down anyone's faith. I'm not saying the devil is fake, or that the Bible lied. I'm saying something far more interesting, and something scholars broadly agree on. The character we call the devil wasn't born fully formed. He was assembled piece by piece over nearly 1,000 years. And you can watch that assembly happen, verse by verse, inside the Bible itself. Before I show you that, if you enjoy history told from the sources, drop a like and subscribe right now. It takes 2 seconds and it genuinely helps the channel. Done. Then let's go. The question this video answers is, if the devil wasn't there at the beginning, where did he come from? Who built the most feared character in the history of religion, and why? And I'll tell you up front, somewhere in the middle of this video, I'm going to show you 2 passages of the Bible that tell the exact same story, the same episode, with the same characters, except in one of them, the one who provokes the tragedy is God, and in the other, written centuries later, someone swapped God for Satan. The same scene, rewritten. And when you see it, you'll understand the precise moment the devil began to be born. Stick around for it. A taste of what's coming. A celestial prosecutor who worked for God. A Persian empire that may have planted the seed of cosmic evil. A serpent that only became Satan 1,000 years later. And the uncomfortable question of who's responsible when bad things happen. Let's go. And it starts with the word Satan, which doesn't mean what you think it means. Let's start with the name, because the name already gives the whole game away. Satan comes from the Hebrew Satan. And here's the first surprise. In the Hebrew Bible, Satan is, most of the time, not a proper name. It's a function, a job description. The word means adversary, opponent, or more specifically in a legal context, accuser. And here's what's fascinating. The word gets used for ordinary human beings all the time. When King Solomon says he has no Satan against him, he means he has no political enemies. When, in the book of Numbers, an angel sent by God blocks the path of the prophet Balaam, the text says that angel, a good angel sent by God, acted as a Satan, an adversary in his way. Stop and let that sink in. In the original Hebrew, even an angel of God can be a Satan, because Satan isn't an evil identity. It's a role somebody plays. It's like the word prosecutor. A prosecutor isn't a specific person. It's a function in a courtroom. And that's exactly how this so-called Satan appears in the very few times he shows up as a figure in the Old Testament, with the definite article, Satan. The accuser as a title, not a name. And where does he appear? Almost nowhere. The phrase "Hey, I Satan" as a heavenly figure appears in only 2 places in the entire Hebrew Bible. 2, and the main one is the Book of Job. The story of Job is where most people think they'll find the devil, and this is where it gets revealing. At the opening of the book, there's a scene in heaven. The sons of God, the celestial beings, the divine court, gather before the throne, and among them, the text says, comes Satan, the accuser. Now pay close attention to how this character behaves, because it's nothing like what you were raised to picture. First, he arrives together with the other angels as part of the heavenly court. He doesn't break into heaven. He isn't God's enemy. He has a reserved seat at the meeting. He's a staff member. Second, it's God who starts the conversation about Job. God asks, "Have you considered my servant Job? There's no one like him on earth." And the accuser responds with his function. He's skeptical, suspicious. He basically says, "Of course Job is faithful, God. Look at everything you've given him. Take it all away and see if he still praises you." He's a cynical prosecutor. His job is to question, to test, to audit the sincerity of human beings. But, and this is the crucial point, he has no power of his own. Look at what happens next. The accuser can't touch a single hair on Job's head without God's express permission. He has to ask, and God grants it with limits. You can touch what he has, but don't lay a hand on him. Then, in a second round, you can afflict his body, but don't take his life. Feel the weight of that? The Satan of the Book of Job is a subordinate, a celestial prosecutor who works inside the divine bureaucracy, under God's direct orders, with no autonomous power at all. He doesn't rule hell. He has no army. He's not at war with God. He is, at most, the most annoying prosecuting attorney in the heavenly court. There's no cosmic war here. There's a government office. So the obvious question is, how did this celestial bureaucrat, this obedient prosecutor, become the Lord of Darkness, the mortal enemy of God, the horned monster that has haunted the Western imagination for 2,000 years? The answer is that something happened to the people of Israel between the Book of Job and the New Testament. Something that changed everything. And to understand what it was, we have to look at the most traumatic moment in ancient Jewish history. In the 6th century before Christ, the kingdom of Judah was crushed. The Babylonians destroyed Jerusalem, burned the temple, and dragged the elite of the Jewish people into exile in Babylon. It was the national and religious catastrophe that shapes much of the Old Testament. And then, a few decades later, Babylon fell, toppled by a new empire, the largest the world had seen until then, the Persian Empire. And the Persians freed the Jews, allowing them to return home and rebuild the temple. But the Jews didn't come back with just their luggage. They came back after generations living inside the Persian cultural world. And the Persians had a religion, Zoroastrianism, with an idea that was radically different from anything in older Hebrew thought. That idea was cosmic dualism. In Zoroastrianism, the universe is a battlefield, a supreme force of good and light, and an independent force of evil at war with it. Two powers, two armies. Evil isn't an employee of good, it's its enemy. Now think about the problem Judaism had until then. In older Hebrew theology, God was responsible for everything, good and evil, prosperity and disaster. There's even a verse in Isaiah where God says plainly that he forms light and creates darkness, makes peace and creates calamity. Everything came from God, and that creates an uncomfortable question, one you've probably asked yourself. If God is entirely good, why does evil exist? Persian dualism offered a way out. Scholars debate how much was Persian influence and how much was internal development. But what's undeniable is that right after contact with Persia, in what scholars call the Second Temple era, Jewish thought starts developing something new, a more autonomous force of evil. And you can catch that shift happening in the biblical text itself. Red-handed. This is what I promised you at the start. Two sets of books tell largely the same story. Samuel and Kings, which are older, and Chronicles, written centuries later. The author of Chronicles used Samuel as his source, copying it, in many places, word for word. But he changed one detail, and that detail changes everything. In 2 Samuel chapter 24, King David sins by taking a census of the people. And the text is direct about who provoked it. The anger of the Lord burned against Israel, and he incited David against them, saying, "Go, take a census." It was God who incited David to sin. Now, centuries later, Chronicles retells the exact same episode. Same story, same census, same David. But look how it begins. Then Satan rose up against Israel and incited David to take a census. Stop. Read those two again, in your head. Older text. God incited David. Read those two again. Satan incited David. You just watched theology being rewritten. The author of Chronicles was uncomfortable with the idea that God pushed the king into sin that no longer fit the theology of his time. So he transferred the blame out of God's hands and into a new agent, Satan. Many scholars call this the first time in the Hebrew Bible that Satan appears possibly as a proper name. Some argue it still just means an adversary. The debate exists, but the movement is undeniable. After the exile, the obedient accuser starts becoming an autonomous enemy. You're watching the piece snap into the character, and that was only the beginning, because it exploded in the following centuries. Between the last book of the Old Testament and the first of the New lies a gap of 3 or 4 centuries, and that gap wasn't silence. It was one of the most creative eras in Jewish religious history. Jews wrote a huge body of texts that never made it into the Bible, what scholars call Second Temple literature. And it's here that the devil finally becomes the devil. Here we get rebel angels who fell. Here the adversary gains names and armies. Belial, Mastema, Satan commanding a legion of demons. Evil becomes an organized kingdom with a leader, in active war with God. Exactly the dualist structure we saw in Persia. There's even a text called the Testament of Job that retells Job's story, but the tone is brutal. That cynical but obedient prosecutor, now he's an obsessive, scheming villain who disguises himself and hates God. The bureaucrat became a monster, and it's this devil that the New Testament inherited. By the time the Gospels were written, the character was already assembled, which is why Satan shows up fully formed, tempting Jesus in the wilderness, the prince of this world. And one last detail that blows people's minds: the serpent in Eden. We grew up learning it was the devil in disguise, but look at Genesis carefully. It never says that. In the Hebrew, the serpent is simply the most cunning of the animals God made, an animal. Nowhere is it called Satan or a fallen angel. That identification only appears strongly over 1,000 years later, when readers who already had the devil in their heads looked back and reinterpreted the old serpent as him. The devil wasn't just absent from the beginning of the Bible, he was retroactively written into stories that were never about him. So what's left? A character nobody invented all at once, and nobody invented from nothing. He started as Hey Satan, an obedient prosecutor in God's court, with no power of his own. After the trauma of exile, Jewish thought needed a new answer to an old question: where does evil come from? And slowly moved the blame from God's hands into an ever more autonomous adversary. We caught that moment in David's census, when God became Satan. And in the centuries after, that adversary gained a name, an army, a fallen angel backstory, and finally the face we know today. Remember what I said at the start, that you can watch the devil assembled piece by piece inside the Bible itself? There it is. Go back and read Job with these eyes, and you'll see a completely different character from the one you were taught. And maybe that's what makes this so fascinating. Because the question behind the whole invention of the devil is the most human one there is. And you've probably asked it: if there's a God, and why does the world hurt so much? The devil, deep down, was centuries of human beings trying to protect the goodness of God from the unbearable weight of the world's evil. It wasn't fear that built the devil. It was a kind of hope. The need to believe the pain didn't come from the one we loved, but from an enemy. The devil wasn't in the original Bible. He came in through the door our own pain opened. If you made it this far, drop a like. It genuinely helps the channel keep making deep dives like this. And tell me in the comments, were you raised believing the serpent in Eden was the devil? Did this surprise you? I read all of them. Subscribe so you don't miss the next ones. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.